The lawyer's voice echoed through the quiet room. And the final asset, the 5-acre land in Ibadan, goes to Kemi. The silence that followed was sharp. Zena's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. What did you just say? She snapped, eyes wide. Their mother's face turned pale. Their father shifted uncomfortably. Kemi sat still, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the weight of years of being told she was nothing. They gave Zena $560,000 to buy her dream home. They gave Kemi nothing, just the label failure. But what they didn't know was this: that land they mocked her for keeping was about to make her the wealthiest person in the family. Kemi grew up hearing the same words over and over again. Why can't you be more like your sister? Zena was the golden child, the one who always made her parents proud. Every report card, every award, every praise at family gatherings was about Zena. Kemi was different. She loved painting, sitting under trees, and sketching the beauty around her. She wasn't interested in the competition her family cared about, but instead of seeing her passion as a gift, they saw it as failure. Her parents often sighed when they looked at her. Her mother would whisper, "You waste your time with colors and dirt," while her father would shake his head, disappointed. They bragged about Zena's new business deals and expensive trips, while Kemi quietly painted in her small room, pretending not to hear the laughter from the living room. Years passed, and their parents decided to help both daughters settle in life. They gave Zena $560,000 to buy her dream home, a huge house with marble floors and glass walls. When it came to Kemi, her father handed her a thin envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper: ownership of 5 acres of land in a faraway rural area. He said with a half-smile, "You're not ready for real responsibility, so this will do." Her mother nodded, as if they were doing her a favor. Kemi held that paper in her hands and forced a smile. She said, "Thank you, Dad." Even though her voice shook, inside, she felt something break. All her life, she had tried to make them proud, but it was never enough. They never saw her heart, her effort, or her dreams. Only her difference. That night, as she lay in bed, Kemi stared at the ceiling and promised herself something. She would never beg for love or approval again. She would stop trying to fit into a family that had already decided she was not enough. She didn't know how or when, but she swore that one day, they would see her worth without her saying a word. From that day on, Kemi carried her pain quietly, but she also carried determination. She stopped trying to please and started planning. She didn't realize it yet, but the land they thought was worthless would one day change her life, and prove that even the disappointment of the family can become its greatest pride. When the family meeting ended, Kemi sat alone with the document in her hand, a deed for 5 acres of land in a village far away from the city. Her father had said it was a small gift, but everyone knew it was more like a joke. Zena had received hundreds of thousands of dollars, while Kemi got land that most people would call useless. Her father even said with a smirk, "At least we gave you something. Consider it charity for a lost cause." Her mother laughed softly, and Zena rolled her eyes, whispering, "Maybe she can paint the trees." Kemi smiled faintly to hide the pain. But that night she couldn't sleep. She took out the paper again and stared at it. It wasn't money, but it was something real, something that belonged only to her. She wondered what it looked like, what kind of soil it had, what stories it held. The next morning, without telling anyone, she packed a small bag and took a bus to the village written on the document. The journey was long and dusty. When she arrived, she found a quiet place with tall trees, open skies, and red earth that stretched far beyond what her eyes could see. The villagers were kind and curious. They told her the land had been empty for years because no one wanted it. But as she walked across it, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The wind blew softly, carrying the smell of earth and promise. While others saw nothing but dry soil, Kemi saw possibilities. She sat under a big mango tree, took out her sketchbook, and started drawing. She imagined rows of crops, greenhouses, maybe even a small school for children one day. She didn't know how to start, but she believed she could turn that empty land into something meaningful. When she returned home, her family laughed at her excitement. Her father said, "That land won't even grow grass." Zena added, "Kemi, stop pretending to be an entrepreneur. You're not built for that." Their words stung, but she didn't argue. She just said quietly, Maybe not, but I'll try. Every weekend, she went back to the land. She learned from farmers, talked to local traders, and studied soil care online. Slowly, she began to see what others couldn't, that the land wasn't a curse, it was a hidden gift. It wasn't given to her to break her, it was given to her to build her. And deep down she knew, one day, they'd all understand why she chose to believe in dirt when everyone else saw nothing. Weeks passed, and Kimmy couldn't stop thinking about how much potential her land had. Every time she visited the village, she noticed how hardworking the locals were and how the soil seemed rich. She started reading about farming online, watching videos, and writing down ideas. One evening, while the family sat for dinner, she finally gathered the courage to share her plan. She told them she wanted to turn her 5 acres into a sustainable farming startup, something that could create jobs, produce food, and help the community. Her mother dropped her fork and stared at her. Farming, she said with disbelief. Zina is out there signing contracts and meeting investors, and you're talking about planting vegetables? Her father chuckled, shaking his head. You're still dreaming small, Kimmy. You were never built for real business. The room filled with laughter, but Kimmy stayed quiet, trying to hold her tears. She explained again that farming could be profitable if done well, that the world was moving toward green agriculture. But her mother waved her hand. Enough. You're chasing dirt while your sister is chasing millions. That night, Zina posted a photo on social media. She was smiling in front of her luxury home, holding a wine glass. The caption read, "Some people just don't belong in success stories." It didn't mention Kemi's name, but everyone who knew them understood. Their family and friends liked and commented, laughing at the inside joke. When Kemi saw it, her hands trembled. She didn't comment. She didn't defend herself. She just put her phone down and stared at the ceiling in silence. The next morning, when she entered the kitchen, her parents were laughing about the post. Her mother said, "Zina always knows how to make people laugh," and her father added, "Maybe humor will teach you something about confidence." Kemi forced a smile, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside, her chest felt heavy. She went to her room and sat on the floor, thinking about every time they'd made her feel small. She had never asked for much, just to be respected for her dreams. Later that day, she went back to the village. The people there welcomed her warmly, not caring about her background. As she looked at her land, she wiped her tears and whispered to herself, "One day, this dirt will speak for me." She decided she would no longer talk about her plans. She would just build them. The world could laugh now, but she knew time had a way of revealing truth. Deep down, she promised herself that one day, the same people who mocked her would use her name as an example of success. One warm afternoon, Kemi was walking through her land with her sketchbook in hand. She had been spending more time there lately, drawing plans for greenhouses and irrigation systems. She often sat under a big tree and dreamed about how the land could become a place of work and growth. That day, while she was sketching, she heard a voice behind her. "You draw well," the voice said softly. She turned around and saw a man about her age, dressed simply but with kind eyes. He introduced himself as Leko, an agricultural engineer working on a nearby project. Kemi smiled shyly and showed him her sketches. They were rough drawings of crop layouts, solar-powered water pumps, and small storage houses. Leko looked at them for a long moment and then said, "You're sitting on gold, Kemi. This land could change lives if managed well." Kemi's eyes widened. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Everyone else had mocked her dreams, but here was a stranger who believed in them. They sat down together and talked for hours. Leko explained how modern farming techniques could turn the land into a productive space. He told her about sustainable crops, irrigation systems, and how to use organic waste to make fertilizer. Kemi listened carefully, writing down every word. For the first time, her ideas didn't feel silly, they felt possible. Over the next few weeks, Leko kept visiting the land. They worked side by side, measuring the soil, checking water flow, and making plans. Sometimes they stayed late into the evening, drawing diagrams under the fading sunlight. Slowly, something beautiful started to grow, not just on the land, but in Kemi's heart. She began to believe in herself again. With Leko's guidance, she registered their new project and named it Green Spring Farms. Together, they started small. They cleared part of the land and planted maize and vegetables. Kemi used her little savings, and Leko brought his technical knowledge. It wasn't easy there. Were days when the weather was harsh and money ran short. But each time she wanted to give up, Leko reminded her. Every great seed starts buried in the dark, but that's where growth begins. Months later, their first harvest came. The crops grew greener than Kemi had ever imagined. Villagers began visiting, asking how she had done it. She shared her story, smiling proudly. With every seed she planted, she felt herself healing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't living in her sister's shadow or begging for approval. She had found something real, purpose, peace, and the courage to dream again. And it all began with a stranger who saw gold where others saw dirt. Months passed, and life began to take an unexpected turn. Zina, who had always lived in luxury, was struggling to keep her business afloat. Her real estate company, once the talk of the city, started losing money after a series of poor decisions. She had invested in several expensive properties that no one wanted to buy. The market fell, and so did her confidence. Creditors started calling, and her perfect social image began to crack. The same friends who used to praise her stopped answering her calls. Slowly, her glamorous life started to fade. At the same time, miles away, Kemi's farm was growing in ways she never imagined. Greenspring Farms had become a model of innovation. With Leko's help, she introduced solar-powered irrigation and organic fertilizer made from natural waste. Her crops were healthier and more sustainable than others in the region. Soon, local buyers began visiting the farm, amazed by what they saw. Her fresh produce started supplying hotels, markets, and even schools. Kemi worked day and night, not out of pressure but passion. She loved every part of it, watching seeds grow, managing workers, and seeing lives improve. One morning, Kemi received an email from a well-known agricultural investor who had read about her work online. They wanted to partner with Greenspring Farms and help expand it nationally. Kemi couldn't believe it. What began as a small dream on a forgotten piece of land was now attracting global attention. Within months, her name started appearing in newspapers and business magazines. People called her the woman turning forgotten land into fortune. Television stations invited her for interviews. Cameras captured her walking proudly through her green fields, explaining how she transformed a neglected farm into $1 million project. The same villagers who once doubted her now celebrated her. They said, "Kemi has made our village proud." Back in the city, her parents were sitting in the living room one evening when her face appeared on the TV screen. The news anchor said, "Meet Kemi Adewale, the young woman revolutionizing agriculture in Nigeria." Her mother froze, and her father dropped his cup of tea. There was their daughter, smiling confidently, standing beside international investors and speaking about innovation and hope. For the first time, her parents didn't recognize the woman on the screen. She no longer looked like the quiet, timid girl they once mocked. She looked powerful, successful, and fulfilled. Zina sat in silence, scrolling through social media where everyone praised Kemi's success. Her sister, the one she had laughed at, had become everything she wished she could be. And while their world was falling apart, Kemi's was blooming beautifully, built on the very land they once called worthless. One quiet afternoon, Kemi was reviewing some farm reports when her phone started ringing. She looked at the screen and froze for a moment. It was her father. It had been months since they last spoke. She hesitated before answering, wondering what he could possibly want. When she finally picked up, his voice sounded tired and weak. "Kemi," he said softly, "your sister's house is under foreclosure. The bank has taken everything. We don't have a place to stay right now. Can we stay with you for a while?" For a few seconds, Kemi couldn't speak. She looked around her modern farmhouse. The tall glass windows, the green fields outside, the workers tending to crops. Everything she had built stood proudly on the same land they once mocked. Her father's voice broke through her thoughts. "Kemi, are you there?" She took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I'll think about it." Then she ended the call. As she sat there in silence, a wave of emotions hit her. These were the same people who laughed when she talked about her dreams, who called her useless, who made her feel small. And now they needed her. The irony was almost painful. Later that evening, she sat outside with Leko watching the sunset. She told him about the call, and he looked at her gently. "What will you do?" he asked. Kemi sighed. I don't know, she said. Part of me wants to help them because they're my family. But another part of me remembers every word they said when I had nothing. Leko nodded. You don't owe them your peace, Kemi. Whatever you decide, make sure it comes from strength, not guilt. That night she couldn't sleep. Memories flooded her mind. Her father calling her a failure, her mother's laughter, Zena's mocking posts. She remembered the tears she had cried in silence, the nights she doubted herself. Yet, she also remembered how far she had come, how she had built her life without them. She realized that the power had shifted. The same family that once rejected her now needed her roof for shelter. The next morning, her mother called too. Her tone was softer than usual. Kemi, please, she said. We're not asking for much. Just a place to stay until things get better. Kemi listened quietly. I'll think about it, she repeated, her voice steady but distant. After the call, she walked through her farm, touching the crops she had nurtured. Everything around her was a reminder of how strength can grow from pain. For the first time in her life, Kemi wasn't the one begging for acceptance. They were. And though she hadn't decided what to do yet, one thing was clear. The same soil they once called worthless had now become the ground they were desperate to stand on. A few days later, Kemi made a decision that surprised even herself. She called her parents and sister and invited them over for dinner. Her mother sounded shocked but quickly agreed. Zena hesitated for a moment before saying yes too. None of them expected what awaited them. On the evening of the dinner, they arrived at the address Kemi had sent. As their car entered the wide gates, they went completely silent. Before them stretched acres of greenhouses glowing softly in the evening light. Workers moved around in uniforms marked Greenspring Farms, and a large billboard stood tall near the entrance, showing Kemi's smiling face with the words, "From soil to success." Her parents stepped out of the car, staring around as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Zena clutched her purse tightly, her eyes darting everywhere. The house ahead was elegant and modern, with glass doors and warm lights that made it glow beautifully. They had imagined a small farmhouse in the village, not a mansion surrounded by thriving land. Kemi walked out to greet them, dressed simply but gracefully. She hugged them politely, not too close, and led them inside. The dining table was set beautifully, with fresh food made from the farm's produce. The air smelled of success and peace. For a few minutes, everyone sat quietly, unsure of what to say. Her father was the first to speak. His voice was low, almost trembling. "You did all this on that land?" he asked, his eyes still full of disbelief. Kemi looked at him, her expression calm. "Yes," she said softly. "The same land you said was nothing." Her words hung in the air like truth they couldn't escape. Her mother shifted uncomfortably, looking at the table instead of Kemi. Zena tried to smile. "Kemi, this is unbelievable," she said, forcing her voice to sound cheerful. But Kemi could see the guilt behind her sister's eyes. She remembered every insult, every moment she was called a failure, but she didn't bring it up. She didn't need to. The success around her spoke louder than any argument could. As the dinner went on, conversation slowly returned. They asked about her work, her achievements, her future plans. Kemi answered politely but without pride. She wanted them to see that she had found peace, not revenge. When the meal ended, her father stood up and said quietly, "We misjudged you, Kemi." She smiled and replied, "Maybe. But everything happens for a reason." That night, as they left, they turned back one last time, staring at the glowing greenhouses. For them, it was a reminder of what they lost through pride. For Kemi, it was the moment she finally saw that she had already won. As they were finishing dessert, the sound of a car stopping outside drew everyone's attention. A few minutes later, the housekeeper walked in and said, "Madam, someone is here to see you." Kemi looked surprised but nodded. The door opened and to everyone's shock, it was Mr. Adewale, the family's longtime lawyer. Her parents immediately stood up. "Mr. Adewale? What brings you here?" her father asked nervously. The old lawyer smiled kindly. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought tonight was the right time to tell you something important," he said, adjusting his glasses. He sat down at the table, placing a folder in front of him. "This concerns your late mother, your grandmother, Mrs. Adewale," he began, looking directly at Kemi. "Before she passed away, she made a private arrangement regarding her inheritance. She asked me not to reveal it until I felt the moment was right. Everyone stared at him in confusion. Her father frowned. What arrangement? The lawyer opened the folder and pulled out an old handwritten letter. Your mother transferred a portion of her assets, including that 5-acre land, directly to Kemi. It was her decision, and she wanted it kept secret at the time. Her mother gasped, and Zena's eyes widened. Kemi sat still, not believing what she was hearing. Mr. Adewale continued gently. Your mother said, and I quote, Kemi may not be loud, but her roots are strong. One day, she will make this family proud. She believed Kemi would use her gift wisely, and she was right. The room fell completely silent. Even Zena, who had always been full of words, couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at her sister. Their parents sat frozen, their faces pale with shocking guilt. It was as if the truth had stripped away years of pride and judgment in one moment. Kemi's hands trembled as she touched the edge of the letter. She could almost hear her grandmother's gentle voice in her mind. This woman had been the only one who ever told her she was special. To know that her grandmother had trusted her even after death filled her with warmth and emotion. Her father finally spoke, his voice breaking. So, all this time, the land wasn't just a gift from us? The lawyer shook his head. No, sir. It was your mother's wish for Kemi to have it. She saw something in her that the rest of you didn't. No one could find any more words to say. Zena wiped her tears quietly, and her mother looked down ashamed. For the first time, they all saw Kemi not as the failure they once mocked, but as the granddaughter their mother had believed in all along. After the lawyer left, silence hung in the room. Zena stared at Kemi, her eyes red and filled with regret. Slowly, she reached out and said, Kemi, I'm sorry. I was jealous. I didn't see what you were trying to do. Please forgive me. Her voice cracked as tears rolled down her cheeks. Their parents sat quietly, both too ashamed to meet Kemi's eyes. Her mother finally whispered, We were wrong, Kemi. We should have trusted you. Her father nodded, guilt heavy in his voice. You turned what we mocked into something beautiful. Please let us make it right. Kemi looked at them. The same people who once called her foolish, who had shut her out when she needed them most. A part of her wanted to believe them. But another part remembered the cold nights when she was alone, crying in silence while they laughed together. She had forgiven them in her heart, but she knew going back would mean losing herself again. Zena held her hand tightly. Please, Kemi. I'll help you. I'll do anything. I've changed. Kemi gently pulled her hand away and said softly, Zena, I don't hate you. I just can't go back to being the person who begged to be seen. Her voice was calm, not angry, just peaceful. The next morning, Kemi called a meeting with her foundation team. I want to launch a new project, she said firmly. A rehabilitation program for struggling farmers, in my parents' name. Everyone was surprised, but she smiled. It's not for reconciliation, she explained. It's a way to honor where I came from, without being tied to the pain. Weeks later, the project began. The village that once mocked her now praised her. Farmers received training, seeds, and modern tools. Her parents' names were written on the entrance gate of the training center. Not as a reward, but as a reminder of how far things had come. When people asked why she did it, Kemi would simply say, because growth starts from forgiveness, not revenge. One evening, as she walked through her farm with Leko, the man who had stood by her through everything, he smiled and asked, Do you think they truly understand now? Kemi looked up at the sky and replied, Maybe. But that's no longer my burden to carry. I've made peace, Leko. I'll never live for their approval again. He smiled, holding her hand as they watched the sun set over the land that once broke her heart, now blooming under her strength. Months later, Kemi walked onto a brightly lit stage in front of thousands of people. The hall was filled with leaders, entrepreneurs, and dreamers from all over the world. Cameras flashed as her name was announced. The Africa Rising Innovator Award goes to Kemi Adeola. The audience stood and clapped as she stepped forward in her elegant green dress, the color of the land that had changed her life. The same land her family once mocked now represented her victory. When Kemi reached the podium, the host smiled and asked, Kemi, what kept you going when even your own family doubted you? For a moment, she looked down, remembering those lonely nights when she cried over their hurtful words. Then she looked up with a calm smile and said, Sometimes rejection plants the very seed that grows your destiny. They called me a failure. But all I did was keep the land and believe in its roots. The hall went silent for a few seconds, and then the crowd erupted into applause. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Her story had become a symbol of hope for everyone who had ever been underestimated. Kemi wasn't just a farmer anymore. She was proof that greatness could rise from pain, that beauty could grow from what others throw away. As the applause continued, she spotted her parents and Zena sitting in the front row. They were clapping through tears, their faces filled with both pride and guilt. Her mother held her father's hand tightly, while Zena's eyes never left Kemi. They finally saw her, not the failure they once mocked, but the woman who had turned soil into success, rejection into purpose. When the ceremony ended, Kemi stepped off the stage and looked around at the flashing lights and cheering crowd. A few journalists rushed toward her, asking more questions, but she only smiled politely. Her heart felt full, but not because of fame or applause. It was because she had finally found peace within herself. She turned slightly, seeing her family standing a few feet away. They wanted to approach her, but she simply nodded with a gentle smile. There was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness. Just calm acceptance. She had forgiven them long ago, not for their sake, but for her own freedom. As the music played and the audience chanted her name, Kemi closed her eyes for a moment and whispered softly to herself, "Thank you for calling me nothing. It made me everything." That night, as she stood beneath the bright lights of the global stage, Kemi realized that she didn't need anyone's validation anymore. She had built her life on faith, hard work, and the very soil they once rejected. And in the end, that soil had carried her all the way to greatness.